enormous unforced error, like someone just basically feeding on
Right.
accident. It does happen in competitive sometimes, like really bad misjudgment, but generally speaking, if nobody makes a huge unforced error and the teams are relatively close in skill level, I would say draft probably presents like 65 to 70% of the result of an individual game.
Sure. Yeah, and that's kind of why I started doing this show is because it's such a huge part of a team's victory. Drafting, it's this really important game you play before you play the game, and
Hmm.
I feel like it was a little underemphasized, like on shows and stuff. It's gotten a lot better, especially like lately. You've been doing draft analysis, Michael Udall, on the stream, so that's good. I love seeing that because I really feel like nobody talked about the draft like the first 2 years of this game, like outside of when the draft was happening in a tournament. So
I feel like as an early competitor in Heroes, it was actually like really to our benefit that we never talked about draft with anyone outside the team, and we always kept quiet about our strategies, not only to
sure.
hide specific strategies, but I think overall understanding of the draft is something that is constantly evolving, and it's an aspect of the game that really helped us win BlizzCon, and we were way ahead
Oh yeah.
in the fundamental aspect of the game in the sense that drafting gave us huge advantages.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. So that's why we're here. But we are going to start again on Sky Temple. The first game will be between L5 from Korea and Dignitas, who
Hmm.
drafted their own kind of. They had their own kind of special brand of Sky Temple draft this tournament. They didn't do it every time, but they did it a number
Yeah.
of times. So look, going into this, what sort of things do you like to emphasize on Sky Temple? Obviously, there's your globals and things like that. But with the current meta, is there anything you're thinking works on Sky Temple, especially?
So current meta on Sky Temple, I would say pro teams are first thing they're going to consider is global,
Okay.
because it's really high value on this map. Second is the way Sky Temple works. A lot of the times you can you can get a slight lead from snowballing, but you can't just completely snowball the game out of control usually on Sky Temple. So the teams will generally try to pick a somewhat closer to standard draft where they can win team fights in the mid to late game if they have to, because a lot of times Sky Temple does come down to that.
Right.
It's not one of the maps where like Sylvanas is not that common currently in the meta on Sky Temple, for example, because it's very difficult to snowball that hard on this map among even skill level teams.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we do see that a lot in these drafts on this map. Um, Globals are probably going to be a mainstay on a lot of maps in this game for a long time. I was able to ask some of the developers about globals if they wanted to maybe change that in some ways, and they did. They have said that they are looking at ways to maybe depower global abilities in some way, but
Hmm.
without taking them all away.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, on this first game here between L5 and Dignitas, we do have the first ban going to L5, and they do ban out the Abathur. Again, emphasizing that global thing you were just talking about. Anything to add to the Abathur, or is that pretty much just they don't want the global pressure?
Um, so in mid-season brawl, the meta actually near the end of the tournament, this is before Malthael patch, so the game had really started to revolve at this point around like Genji or Chen like threatening backline, and Abathur was a really big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the Abathur ban makes a lot of sense to me if they're concerned about targeting the backline or having their backline targeted. And overall, he just had a really high win rate and was extremely strong in all of midseason brawl.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay. Now, as far as Abathur goes, do you feel there are certain maybe teams that should stay away from Abathur? As far as like, do you think there are regions that execute the Abathur better than others, or do you think he pretty much brings what he brings, no matter what when you pick him? Like there are some picks where it's just like, yeah, everybody can play Malfurion, but obviously Abathur's a little different.
um, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's region based. I would say each team needs to spend a little bit of time learning Abathur. I don't think that he's a particularly hard hero for the Abathur player. He requires like a little different sense of macro and the importance of kind of map awareness, but overall the team just needs to learn how to play around being like pseudo 4v5
Mm-hmm.
rather than any serious investment
Okay.
uh, in order to learning Abathur IMO.
I found an old picture from BlizzCon to put in my little frame, so we'll do that real quick. Okay, so yeah, we have those picks, or that first ban, and then the first ban coming out from Team Dignitas is the Genji. Now, Genji has been discussed a lot. Obviously, he's an incredibly powerful hero. Do you find, especially in competitive, in the hands of these players, do you find him to be a higher priority over, say, an Uther for the first ban?
This is a tough one. So before the Malfurion changes, I think the fact that Malfurion is in the meta and Uther is in the meta is healthier here, so that you can ban Genji, and then with Abathur banned and Genji banned, there's not as many heroes who can threaten your Malfurion healer. Like Illidan without Abathur hat is not nearly as scary to Malfurion. Chen without Abathur hat not nearly as scary to Malfurion. So to me, the Genji ban is actually like the first sign that Dignitas probably wants to play a Stitches comp, because the most likely response from L5 to the Genji ban is to pick Uther or Dahaka or Nubrak. Those are basically the 3 power picks that the Koreans respect at this point in the drafting phase. And that means that Dignitas has kind of opened up to get some of those power picks in response, but also late draft, potentially Stitches Malfurion for the follow-up route.
Sure. And now Stitches is going to obviously appear in these drafts, and kind of came not necessarily out of nowhere. Stitches existed for a while, but we saw a lot of Stitches play in this tournament, and now we're seeing a lot, I think, in Hero League and probably in future like HGC matches. Do you think it was just kind of a thing where people kind of rediscovered Stitches a little bit, or what is it about Stitches that's changed, or has the meta changed to put Stitches in a better place?
So after the most recent Stitches buffs, I feel like he's probably been strong the entire time. The meta maybe right now has a slightly less emphasis on single target blow up, with like the, Varian got phased out of the meta over the last couple of months, and then the frontline targeting style blow up seems to have been a little less prominent. So Stitches is rather vulnerable to that, especially percent damage. Okay. So it kind of makes sense that as that fell out, Stitches becomes more popular. But overall, my guess is Stitches was just kind of a sleeper hero. I mean, JPL has always played Stitches pretty much throughout the history of Heroes Competitive. And I think it's no surprise that Dignitas plays it, because they play it so much and they play it well. But I think the fact that we saw it in Midseason Brawl is bringing it to everyone else who's like, oh, dang, this guy is actually really powerful.
Right, and it's a little deceptive, right? Because it requires a team that will follow up those hooks like with nice reactions. So he's definitely a hero that you kind of have to practice. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, even among the pro teams, there's huge differences in how well they follow up off of Stitches hooks and how well they understand what their game plan is. That's why Dignitas Stitches is so scary, not just because JPL lands hooks, but the whole team knows how to like position around his hooks, how to like buy time for the hooks to actually land in team fights, all that sort of stuff.
And additionally, they know how to maybe not follow up a hook. Like you'll see his Stitch's teammates a lot of time, the hook will hit and it'll be maybe less than optimal, or like not the right time, like right situation to pile on, and they'll let it go. So that takes a lot of coordination and practice. So play Stitches at your own risk, I guess, is what I'm saying. So L5 coming into this draft with the first pick, they do choose something that is not too surprising. There are other priority picks, but Vala is always solid, so they go with the Vala on this one. Do you like this first pick from the Korean team here?
I think this is actually really surprising. At this phase in the tournament, this Vala first pick, this is something I would expect from E-Star, just because they have always prioritized Vala so highly. And it's not that I think Vala is bad, but I was really surprised with the Vala priority here, with both of this patch's God tier supports up, and also, I mean, like Dahaka's up. There's just so much value here.
I'm gonna pretend that's your DX racer chair there squeaking, and not your dog.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Vala was a little surprising to you just because of the emphasis on other heroes so far. Now, this gives an opportunity to Dignitas, I feel, to kind of maybe depower or counterpick the Vala a little bit, or at least deny the Tassadar or Oriel. But they don't do that path. Dignitas does pick up the stitches right away, along with the Uther. Now, in this situation, we talk about this a lot, and most people seem to agree it's the same way. Would you rather counter with your early draft picks, such as denying the Ariel, or would you rather just focus on your team comp and get your Stitches and Uther power picks that you want?
Well, this is something a lot of teams differ on, actually, is whether they would rather try to deny power or pursue their own game plan. And here, I think it's definitely correct for Dig actually to choose their own game plan, because if Dignitas takes the Ariel in this rotation, they probably take another of the power picks in the meta at the time, but it can't be Uther. Maybe they go Anubarak, but Uther's got a really good matchup against Anubarak, so you don't really want L5 to have that. And then Dignitas has to kind of try and panic in the later half of the draft and get an Ariel battery.
Right.
So I feel like letting L5 have the Ariel makes a lot of sense in this specific situation, because Ariel's also rather weak to Stitches. No cleanse, Aegis only comes online at level 10, and oftentimes leaves the person in a bad position afterwards anyway. So I think this is actually a totally reasonable choice by Dig. It just kind of sets them up for, a hard game.
Yeah, for sure. And L5, I would agree with you, and most of our guests tend to lean towards that direction, especially in a situation like this where you've practiced a certain thing and you definitely want to get as close to it as you can.
Yeah.
So, okay. So L5 here doesn't disappoint with the picks. They pick up Tassadar and Ariel. How scary is this in your estimation?
It really is a per team basis, I would say, how scary Tass Ariel is at the competitive level. I feel like some teams just don't execute Tassadar Ariel particularly well, and some teams are absolutely amazing at it. In general, though, I think this is one of the strongest core lineups you can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing a lot of people pick and do well with, so for sure. Do you feel there's any kind of direct picks that kind of not counter this, but maybe make it a little less powerful? What sort of, like, say this happens in your draft, what sort of things can you be looking at to maybe help against this Holy Trinity type thing going on here?
Yeah, so I think at this point, the good thing for Dignitas is that they're already on one of these plans that counters this. So when you have this Trinity, the Volatas Ariel, right, their biggest strength is 5v5 team fights. They want to 5v5 team fight you. They want you to be actually engaged in a fight, so Vala can trade and provide hope for Ariel, where she's basically indestructible. The ways you can possibly counter this are use a pick composition where you're trying to isolate and kill one target rather than 5v5 team fighting, which is the direction Dignitas is going here. Or you can kind of play a macro game style composition. A lot of those heroes aren't in the meta right now, especially in competitive, but if you think back to like when Nidus Zagara was in the meta, it was really common for the Nidus Zagara style team to out-rotate the double support team, where Taz has okay wave clear, Vala has okay wave clear, Ariel has okay wave clear, but you get all three and now it really feels like you're lacking, especially with the fact that they kind of have to move as a unit. So I think those are the two primary strategies to kind of counteract this trio. Is you either look for picks or you look for map control. If you want to team fight them, I don't really know if there's any strategy that can consistently win you team fights against this style of composition. So it's just so strong in that aspect. So
you have to, basically what you're saying is when you see something this kind of this powerful, it's better to draft a strategy that revolves around not team fighting it and hoping your team can macro. Okay. Like out macro them, out soak them, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You can't really outbrawl that for sure. Okay. So the next ban, it's second ban phase now, and Dignitas actually chooses to ban out Chen, another hero that we kind of in that Stitches school where it's like we didn't see this hero too much, and now we're seeing him pretty often. What do you think of Chen right now and what he provides?
So I think the biggest strength of Chen is actually when he's paired with an Uther, because the armor really amplifies how effective his shielding is at mitigating damage and disincentivizes the enemy team using stuns or silences to interrupt the drinking
Right.
because of the Guardian of Ancient Kings. Now, in this draft, I'm actually not certain why Dignitas banned it. Maybe it's something they felt they don't want to play at all, and
Yeah.
it's better to ban a tool that you have no chance of using against an enemy team than to, even if you think another ban might be slightly better, but maybe it would be better for you. Maybe you can get them to ban it, right? If L5 knows Dig never plays Chen, they'll never ban it. Dig maybe is worried about the Chen.
Mm-hmm.
So it also is a really hard engage hero, and it can always dive on the stitches basically if one of its allies gets hooked. Maybe be disruptive with Keg. I know they were using a lot more Storm spirits, but still, I think the Chen ban here is just a nod to how strong L5's Chen performance was
Right.
and how difficult it is to deal with it.
They had been playing him a lot, but yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to. Is like you think that with the Uther you'd want the Chen normally because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't draft stuns, then Chen Fat Illidan walks all over you, and if you do draft stuns, then Guardian of Ancient Kings makes it like they're just it's like this kind of lose-lose situation with both those heroes on your team. It's not guaranteed, obviously, but it's definitely hard to work around. So, okay. I guess that
Yeah.
makes sense as far as the Chen ban on Dignitas. L5, again, just sticking with the globals, they ban out the Falstad. Falstad's a little... I want to say his results are very sporadic in professional play right now. Obviously, he has the global, and he'll be very strong. I think if a team wants to get cheeky and play Hanamura, they can definitely take the bribe too. So that's a double plus. But he seems to have fallen off a little bit in his win percentage, especially at this level.
Yeah.
Uh, why do you think that is? And do you think the Falstad ban was still smart?
Hmm. As to his win rate, I'm not really sure. I feel like there's just a lot of variations that happen there
Mm-hmm.
from tournament to tournament. I think Falstad is still extremely strong, but he really does require the team to play around him well. And I think Dig is one of the better Falstad teams. Historically, Snitch has actually had a really good Falstad that's kind of gone under the radar, but also in this particular draft of the globals, if you think of like the traditional globals, Falstad, Dahaka, Brightwing,
Mm-hmm.
Dignitas already has a support. They don't really want Brightwing. Dahaka is not particularly useful on following up after a hook. You have CC, but you don't bring a ton of damage. Whereas Gust to disengage the 4-man after the primary kill target is hooked is an enormously powerful
Yeah.
like tool to use, especially if your whole composition is going to hinge on hook kills. It's extremely valuable. So I would guess that's why L5 banned it. It's just the best of the kind of three standard globals for Dignitas here.
Sure. Okay, just kind of a sensible ban, despite his. I mean, I don't want to say he's underperformed lately. It's just he.
Mm-hmm.
I think new heroes have come out, and he's just not the god he was, kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So okay. So moving back over to Dignitas' side of the draft, this is something where I was like, oh, that's actually like really smart with the Genji gone. They do pick up the Greymane, obviously really good with Uther, but then an Illidan. Illidan Uther, to me, in theory, at least, sounds really strong. Like, for all the same reasons Genji is strong, you know, with that
Mm-hmm.
armor reduction. So, do you think this is a thing we'll see more with the Uther Illidan? Do you like the Illidan pick here?
Yeah. So I think this is over the whole course of this tournament, we kind of saw the Illidan play ramp up
Mm-hmm.
throughout the tournament, and I think the Falstad ban is like the pre-Illidan is in the meta best ban, right? But once Illidan
Right.
is in the meta, it's so much harder to draft around an enemy Uther in competitive
Yeah.
because you're totally right. The Uther armor plus the Illidan has so much synergy. You think about the traditional counters to an Illidan composition: high CC, burst damage. Illidan dives in, you just try to focus fire him, isolate him from his team if you can. You have always had a tough time doing that against an Uther because of the availability of G Shield,
Mm-hmm.
but now he doesn't even have to blow the Divine Shield cooldown. If he can land one heal on Illidan
Right.
during a stun or a root, the 75 armor will pretty much take care of all the mitigation Illidan needs because he already has so much mitigation on his own. So really, this tournament, Midseason Brawl, we saw the rise of Illidan Uther as just an absolutely insane combination, and it
Yeah.
fills out the global gap that Dig really wanted, to fill on their roster.
For sure, yeah. Now they have the almost global, like pretty big
Mm-hmm.
global. Yeah, and me personally, I kind of I kind of would take a 75 armor Illidan over a 75 armor Genji a lot of times, you know? Like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously Genji does so much damage, but I don't know. He's just, with the evade, like, it's like, man, this guy can just really live, you know? So
Yeah.
I like this pickup a lot, and I was surprised when I saw it live. Well, not surprised, but kind of like, oh, that's really cool, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so far looking good for Dignitas. And L5 is going to finish their team with the someone who is obviously a very high priority pick these days and got kind of left towards the end of the draft, Anubarak, and their other going with the double front line with Arthas. Do you like these choices here? Oh, and I can link
This
you to
isn't.
these drafts if you need them. I don't know if you have them up.
No, it's okay.
Okay,
I know where they are in
okay,
Master League.
cool.
This is an interesting one. I feel like L5 here, in theory, if you smashed these five teams into each other, I mean these five heroes into each other, like these two compositions,
Mm-hmm.
L5's comp looks really good
Right.
because in a standard team fight, they will crush Dig. Like, there's no way the Illidan Greymane kill Tass, Ariel, Vala with Arthas peeling. The Uther is probably going to get web wrapped a lot of the fights. Like, it's going to be really tough for them to survive if they're diving. The Stitches value is going to be marginal against like an Anub Arthas in theory. So I feel like here this is an example of where like a lot of times in Hero League you'll see people just 100% focus on the draft. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the team fight, I'm sorry, in the
Yeah.
draft phase. So in the draft phase,
L5's comp,
they'll
yeah.
be like, yeah, we'll think about the team fight. Like, okay, imagine in our heads, what does it look like if we fight them 5v5 the whole game? But that's really not how the game is played. And I feel like L5 kind of fell into a trap here where they don't have a global to respond to the post 10 pseudo global of Illidan, and they can sort of force hard engage fights with Cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but against Stitches, that's also very tough. And I feel like the Arthas is not able to really respond to a hook and kill attempt. Like a lot of tanks can dive past, like the Anubrat can engage in theory on a kill attempt, but the Arthas can't. He's gonna have a really hard time like just walking in.
Right.
So I feel like L5's comp is way stronger in a 5v5 brawl, no matter what Dig picks in the fifth slot.
Sure.
But since they already have an advantage in the Illidan, they're gonna have macro pressure, and the hooks will probably have the time to kind of like pick the composition apart.
Right. Well, I'm glad you said that because when I looked at this draft, I kind of was like, is it manner? Like, is it bad manner of me to say this? Because it kind of feels like L5 drafted NA draft. Like, they're like, we're going to fight you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but it's Sky Temple, you know? Like you can macro on this map really, really
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, kind of odd. Obviously, L5 is a very good team fighting team. But it looks to me like Dignitas kind of snuck out of that draft, that hole so far, and they do fill out their team with another interesting pick. And obviously, this is Dignitas's thing. The Stitches Kael'thas. So what does Dignitas do with the Kael'thas that they like it with the Stitches? Is it just kind of the double stun thing, or
Yeah, it's just the stun follow up, and I think for Dignitas, Mene is just probably the most, I guess, proficient mage player in the world, perhaps. Like he almost always play mages.
mm-hmm.
His performance on mages is unparalleled in competitive, and the fact that it's a comfort pick for him, it's a composition that they practice day in and day out. It's like their most comfortable composition, I would say, in the current meta is like this Stitches comp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Kael'thas also, it provides so much extra wave clear that it really does allow more timing windows for the Stitches hooks, because if you can get in position first, it gives you so much more control of spacing and the chance to actually get hooks. Like everyone's had those games where you try to posture up for a hook or something and you miss one hook, and then the objective's gone. You have to like try and fight a normal fight with Stitches, and now your whole comp kind of falls apart. The Kael'thas wave clear advantage really does help in this sort of matchup.
Yeah, yeah, and the full slam build Stitches obviously doing
Mm-hmm.
a ton of AOE damage and wave clear, and just really, really able to harass a team fight really well on a low cooldown. So, and then you have the Kael'thas there just wreaking havoc, and Illidan and Greymane doing the same thing, all while having armor. So it's a solid draft for sure from Dignitas, and I can
Mm-hmm.
see why they like it.
Yeah.
I'm also I can also see why they like it on Sky Temple specifically. So yeah, they did end up winning this game against L5 and the series. Any other comments on this before we move on to the one against Fnatic?
Yeah, so you mentioned Sky Temple with the Stitches thing, and I think that's actually really important too, because if you think about all of the different map objectives in Heroes of the Storm, Sky Temple has one of the slowest, right? Like you have to stand on that temple for a long time to get all the shots.
Right.
So you combine that with the fact that a lot of the time you kind of have to split on Sky Temple because the Mercs are on top and bottom lane, and there's frequently two temples. There's a lot of time to get Stitches hooks while the enemy is standing on temples. It's not like Infernal Shrines where there's a whole bunch of little minions to block the hooks from Stitches, and the splitting up is just really good for the kill composition of the Stitches rather than the death ball composition that L5 ended up running.
Yeah, for sure. Those are exact reasons why, yeah, I feel like it's a really strong draft on there. And the other thing that kind of makes it nice for them, I think, is they're the only ones doing it specifically. At least in this tournament.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like their thing, and they know people aren't practicing against it, except for maybe other EU teams, you know. But because we have seen it before, but like a Korean team like this might not be ready for that, you know. So that's another plus for them for sure.
It's so difficult to play against a composition that you don't have much experience against. It's kind of like when Chen first showed up in Midseason Brawl. Everyone was getting rolled by it.
Yeah.
Just because you don't know what you're supposed to do against it, right? And then eventually you figure out, okay, either I have to ban this hero in draft, or this is the kind of thing you need to do. And I feel like Dignitas has a really big advantage by nobody else being the Stitches team.
Right.
You know?
Right, absolutely. And I think, just like you said with Cloud9, like, I think that's one of the biggest keys to winning at a LAN is having pocket drafts that are actually good, and then people have not seen, like, you know, so many free wins come off of a draft like that, you know, and I feel like that's what Dignitas did this tournament. So yeah, really good. But now we're going to move on to Game 7, the epic finals, Game 7 of the grand finals of Midseason Brawl. Where obviously these guys had been playing like 4 hours or something, and a lot of frayed nerves, a lot on the line, and they're going into the draft. And to me, if it was me, I would feel like I'd be way more like nerve-wracked in the draft than in the game, because in the game you have something to focus on, right? But in the draft you're like just sitting there thinking. Yeah, pretty tense this draft. But the first pick did go to Fnatic, and Fnatic, smart team as they are, first bans out the Uther. So that's, to me, at least in this tournament, in my view, that's the way to go in this tournament, because he closes off so many avenues of drafting. If you just say, nah, just get rid of it, you know, like. So, what do you think of the Uther ban from Fnatic?
Yeah, I think the Uther ban makes a ton of sense right now. I think the strength of Uther is kind of propping up all of the Illidan, Genji, Chen, like all of those compositions where you just kind of dive the backline. They're all right now basically being held up by the pillar that is like Uther, and potentially Anubrak can be used instead. You can force fast fights with him as well with Cocoon. So coming into basically every draft, Fnatic is a team that knows they want to play globals. Everyone knows Fnatic is the globals guy, like global guys. That's what they do, right? So banning out Uther kind of takes away one of the primary tools of the fast fight compositions, which is what you don't want as a global team. You want slower engages. You want time for your globals to respond. You want there to be a poke phase. And that's a really good job by Fnatic to identify one of the strongest enablers of the fast fight hard engage compositions.
Right. So this is where I think the most important question of this draft comes in, right? Like, so you're Dignitas. If I'm sitting in that chair on Dignitas' side and I see the Uther ban, which, you know, you kind of had to maybe see coming, do you still try your thing? You know, is Uther the key element, or do you try a different path?
I don't think you identify Uther as a key element to the Stitches composition, especially on this patch where it feels like Malfurion is also a top tier support, and he combos with the Stitches to enable kills. It definitely, you go into this draft, you see the Uther ban, it definitely doesn't immediately turn you off the Stitches game plan, I don't think, especially given how successful you've been with it recently and how comfortable you are with it. And historically,
Mm-hmm.
specifically in the Dignitas Fnatic matchup, the Stitches has almost never failed them. Fnatic
Right.
is known for losing grand finals to Dignitas because of the Stitches
Because of
comp.
Stitches, right.
Yeah, so as Dig, you're feeling really good here, just locking in the Stitches whenever you can. It doesn't really matter that Uther's gone.
Okay.
That's your comfort zone.
All right. That's good. That's good to know. And you're right. Like, it's just historically so successful for them. And JPL is obviously probably the best Stitches in the world. I don't know. I mean, most likely. So they do go ahead and stick with it. For me, with the current way things are, I might have thought about it, but you're right. I probably would have been like, this is our thing, and this is why we picked this map, you know. So
Yeah.
they pick up the Stitches Kael'thas. Now, it should be noted that not everything in this game came down to draft. I do not think JPL hit a hook this game, which is just bizarre. He may have hit like a couple little short ones, but his hooks were not landing this game. Which I think is a credit to Fnatic. They just really were dodging really well. It's not that the hooks were bad by any means, but that should be noted. Oh, sorry, not the Kael'thas. That's not time yet. I skipped the ban. So they do ban the Abathur.
Yeah. So the Abathur ban definitely tells me that Dig wants to play the Stitches strategy, because Abathur is, if Illidan or Chen get an Abathur hat, they can pretty much permanently dive Stitches and destroy him in the early game before he gets Bile. It's such a tough matchup. Illidan loves playing against Stitches because Stitches is trying to hook you into his team. Well, Illidan wants to be there anyway. Like, getting rid of the Uther weakens Illidan, but getting rid of the Abathur as well, that's kind of like the death blow, in my opinion, for that hero. Like, Illidan does not function if you don't have one of these two, in my opinion.
Uther or Abathur?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's very logical. I think that's probably fair. So yeah, if if I'm Dignitas with these two, with like obviously Dignitas wanted to ban out the Abathur, but it's hard. You're gonna have to fall back on a modified version of your draft, most likely. Most likely.
Yeah. So we saw in the last draft, Dignitas was comfortable using the Illidan, right? So you would suspect that they're happy having the Abathur, but it doesn't really fit in the Stitches comp. It just, you don't really have room in the composition for a hero who doesn't help the kill potential at all, and he's kind of weak in the early game. You get pushed in, whereas you really want to have like tempo advantage by wave clearing faster, getting mercs out faster, so you have more time to set up for hooks. So the Abathur really is not great with the Stitches style composition.
Right. Okay. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that actually makes sense. Yeah. So sorry for the parts I skipped, everybody, but Fnatic does pick up the Anubarak. So we saw him late in the draft against L5, and we saw him highly prioritized by Fnatic here as the first pick. Do you think that lends to their success against this kind of comp? Now, we've said they like globals. They opted not to first pick a global.
I think this is excellent because at this point, Dignitas hasn't committed to the Stitches plan. You don't necessarily know what Stitches is doing. These bans just kind of somewhat disable the sort of divey backline. I mean, the divey like melee assassins who target the backline. So I think the Anubarak ban, it's one of the high priority picks of the whole tournament. It's an extremely powerful hero. It's got hard engage anytime the enemy team is sort of out of position. I feel like it's just an extremely good, well-rounded first pick. And there's pretty much like, you can't go wrong first picking Anubarak with Uther banned, basically.
So yeah, a thing we talk about a lot on here again is not tipping your hand. So these heroes that are just good heroes all the time that don't give away a strategy are always going to be super high priority in professional or high level competition. And Anubarak's exactly that. Like that tells you nothing, basically. You know they're probably going to want globals, but it still tells you nothing. You know. Yeah. Okay. So cool. And then we get to the Stitches Kael'thas and JPL not hitting those hooks. Now, do you think they were worried about them banning the Kael'thas? Is that why they picked him second?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think if you're going into this draft, at this point in Midseason Brawl, Dig has used Stitches Kael'thas so many times, and it's been very effective. I think Fnatic would have banned Kael'thas in the second ban phase if Dignitas had picked another hero.
Right.
So I think that's a totally reasonable thing. My problem with this is they've shown their whole hand. They are completely 100% all in
Right.
on the hook strategy, basically, at this point. And the way Fnatic reacts to this is absolutely beautiful.
Okay. Let's
Yeah.
take a look at it. They do pick up Genji Dahaka. Genji and Dahaka, there they are. Now, one thing before we get into the Genji Dahaka is this kind of tells me that L5 must have really been in the dark for the for them to last pick Kael'thas and then second pick him, or first round of picks here. That's pretty. It's kind of surprising actually. But
Yeah.
tell us why you think the Genji Dahaka are so good against these this plan that Dignitas is going with.
I think this is a really, really good draft response. Partly just on power level wise. Like if you look at these heroes, I don't think anyone would argue that like power level wise, any like either of Dignitas's picks is even close to the individual power level of
Yeah.
Fnatic's picks. These are the three of the four prime picks for this event,
Yeah.
right? These are like the holy grail of
The-
what people were trying to first pick.
It's the cream of the crop here, and they got it
Yeah,
all. Like
yeah,
except
except
for
the Uther. They didn't get Uther, right?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Uther also kind of counters Genji. He was one of the things holding Genji down
Sure.
in the sense that if the enemy team has Uther, Genji's kill potential is almost zero, and he's threatened when he dives into the backline because of the threat of an Uther stun, whereas a lot of the other supports don't really bring the on-demand instant stun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important against the Genji. And not only that, but I feel like a Nubrak Genji is an insanely good two-man combo to have in your composition because they're both really aggressive dive heroes. Nubrak enables kills on backline for Genji with how much CC he brings, and the web wrap is so good in fast fights, and Genji's good in fast fights as well.
Right.
You really want the fight to kind of blow up. I kind of look at team fighting. Your team is either like a fast fight composition or a slow fight composition relative to the enemy team, right? So you have to take everything in terms of, relative to the enemy team. And a Nubrak, Uther, and Genji, I think, are like the three fastest fight composition heroes in the whole game right now. And Fnatic has two of them.
Yeah.
And they're going to completely out fast fight Dignitas here, who has Stitches, who really needs time to set up and find hooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on top of it, they have a nice, I would say probably him or Falstad, priority global, on top of it. So in fights, you have a nice setup, and like you said, yeah, the speed with which they can just get a kill, even without heavy CC. I mean, they have pretty heavy CC for 3 picks, actually, now that I look at it. But, yeah, the Genji here, that's a hard target to hook. That's like Tracer level, almost, of hard to hook. So, again, it's what's many people consider the best hero in the game, and he's really good against Stitches. So,
yeah,
letting that through. Would you have banned Genji before Abathur?
No, because I don't think in isolation Genji is that scary. When you ban the Abathur, I think that's totally reasonable. Maybe if you're Dignitas, you have to change your draft up a little bit because of the risk of the Anubrak, Genji, Dahaka. Like giving up all three just seems so sketchy. I feel like you could have dropped the Kael'thas and picked up maybe one of the two of those heroes, or adjusted your draft somehow to deal with this.
Right.
But again, they just want their comfort, and they're kind of under the gun here because they're second pick, right? They don't have a strong position in the draft in this sort of metagame where there's so many power picks, but they also want to secure their own style. It really kind of plays against Dignitas here that they couldn't they couldn't secure power picks because they wanted to play Stitches, and they're those two were kind of irreconcilable.
Right. So let me allow this link here. Okay. Yeah. So that all adds up to me. I do. When I first saw this, I was like, I get banning Abathur, but now that you've kind of explained it more, I totally get banning the Abathur. So, yeah. Moving into the second ban phase, an interesting ban here with the Tychus on the side of Dignitas. Not seeing a lot of Tychus. Obviously, he's really good against your Diablos and things like that. what do you think of this ban on the Tychus here?
I'm not really sure why this Tychus was the choice here, in all
Yeah,
honesty. I mean, you have a lot of CC set up on Fnatic. You can kill Stitches in the CC chain if you have Tychus, but overall, I don't really consider Tychus high priority or that much of a threat. So
right.
I
No,
don't know if that's my bias or if I'm mistaken here, but I really don't believe Tychus is that strong. And I think banning him here is kind of waste.
yeah, I feel the same way. And all the other thing that I think I'm positive Dignitas is aware of is Tychus is really good against one tank. Against two, his value really drops off. He can't minigun both, and he can't bigger they are, like so he has a hard time against I think a harder time against two tanks than one, personally, and I think that's kind of like agreed upon. But I don't know. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's not unreasonable. I mean, I don't think Tychus is terrible against double tank.
Right.
I think he just becomes like maybe a like he's just a standard range carry at that point, right? He
Sure.
just fills in and does the range roll.
He's a,
He
he's a
just
he's a
yeah.
Zul'jin then, yeah, kind of thing. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, the Tychus ban a little weird, and then Fnatic. I think with a really smart ban here on the Tracer, given what we said earlier about Illidan. What do you think of the Tracer ban?
Tracer ban is really interesting. I think not many people would identify Tracer here as a threat. And I don't think that Tracer herself is really the threat, which is the interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason this ban is actually good is because it disables the Task Tracer synergy
Mm-hmm.
composition. Um, you could just ban the Tastadar, but we've seen in the past that Dig is willing to play Mouth Tracer as well.
Yeah.
And while it's not as powerful, I think banning the Tracer disables the TAS Tracer composition, which would have dramatically slowed down the team fights. That's one of the things that TAS does really
Okay.
well is he just slows down team fights so much because shields Oracle means that people can't get in position to kind of jump on your Kael'thas. Like your Kael'thas isn't going to be out of position if he knows where the whole enemy team is, right? A lot of times positioning in a high level game, whether you win or lose a team fight is decided on like which direction you are from the tank. Are you positioning, like assuming you're left to right, matching up, like are you playing above and right or
Mm-hmm.
below and right? Like that kind of thing can decide games. And
Right.
that's the advantage that Vision gives you. So I think with Tracer gone, Dig actually can't pick Tassadar because there's no other hero they can fit in their like fifth slot where if you assume Dignitas has to pick Tassadar, Healer, X,
Mm-hmm.
the only hero that actually is enabled well enough in that comp to be worth having is Tracer. Or maybe you can make an argument for Illidan, but I don't think that's a threat with how much CC Fnatic has.
Okay.
So
Not even Vala.
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, Dignitas historically is not really known for like the Tas Vala
Right.
Ariel
Right.
style. And the problem with Tas Vala Ariel in your last three slots is you have so little follow up
Mm-hmm.
on hooks. You have to go like force wall maybe to try and lock down
It's
hooks.
awkward.
It's a little awkward. It's not really Dignitas' style, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Liquid Oxy GG brings up a good point too. Actually, she does blow. She just disintegrates Cocoon, Li Ming style. Like so. That's
Uh huh.
that's another bonus there actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was thinking because of the inability to draft Illidan, but those are good points on the Tracer pick. Do you think there's if it's you and Fnatic's drafting chair, do you think there's a better ban here than Tracer? Obviously, you get the bonus of banning like soft banning Tassadar, but
Is there a better ban? I'm not sure.
yeah, it's
I
tough to
think,
say.
yeah, so Stitches comp and Tracer comp are pretty much like Dignitas' two signature comps, so
Right.
maybe Fnatic just didn't want to deal with both at the same time.
Sure.
That definitely seems like a possibility.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. So there's your bans. Going back on the side of Dignitas, they get the Medivh, interestingly enough, and the Malfurion. Now, this is not nerfed Malfurion. This is really, really good Malfurion, so that one makes a lot of sense. What do you think of the Medivh?
The Medivh is kind of curious to me here. I always seem to oscillate between like, man, Medivh is so broken, and then like, man, Medivh just doesn't seem like he does anything.
He has the best kit in the game, right? But yet you're like, I don't know, like, you know.
Yeah, I I feel like he kind of provides the vision role that Tass does for the Stitches, lining up hooks and protecting Kael'thas. He kind of follows up, like, if you can get 2 Qs off on a hook, that's a good amount of damage. But at the same, like, and Leyline kind of does what Gust is, where maybe you can zone the
Sure.
4 man after you hook one, but it just seems like it's like so hard, I feel like, to force him into that role in this comp. I don't think it can't work. I just think like this is a little tough for them to handle here, and it also really hurts their wave clear situation,
Yeah.
which is looking good overall. But you always want your Stitches and your KT, and now that you have Malfurion, you kind of want those three together as often as possible. So having one of the other heroes not able to wave clear does really hurt, even though overall interior composition has enough wave clear. Because of the style of roaming around you want to play, where you want to roam as a trio, it can really hurt to not have like the extra lane cleared instantly.
Right.
Sort of like the Ariel Tazvala, they want a 3 man shovel lane. They have good wave clear in that respect. But if you're losing wave clear in the lane adjacent to that, and the enemy can rotate down and make it a 4v3, that's really bad for that composition.
Yeah, and this is the point in the draft for me. With the Tychus ban and the Medivh pick was where I was kind of like, I think maybe Dignitas is getting affected by the tension in this draft, this big arena, Game 7.
Yeah.
Because the whole time I'm like, you know, Falstad is still... Falstad? Hello? Falstad? Like, but they're just giving them Falstad for Medivh. And that's where I was kind of like, uh-oh, you know, like, this comp is not the comp we saw versus L5 at all, you know.
Yeah.
Does have the protection. It's a little safer. But the macro element is definitely decreased, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's a little scary for Dignitas here. Fnatic, obviously, they do pick up the Falstad because they're a great global team. And this is where everyone was really shocked was they're like, well, let's just get a third one. And they pick up Brightwing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the thoughts? Obviously, the Falstad makes a lot of sense. Did you like the Brightwing choice?
The Brightwing, to me, I want to say maybe it's a little too much. Like, we're going a little too ham on globals here, and that was my perspective before seeing the game.
Right.
I mean, hindsight, obviously,
Same
2020.
here.
Oh my God, Brightwing, such an amazing pick.
Yeah.
You know, but I can see why Fnatic picked this. Even before the game, I can understand why. Like, they never want to posture up and let Dignitas threaten a team fight that starts with someone getting hooked. They never want that to happen. So for Fnatic, how do we avoid hooks the whole game? We just, you know, we never like posture for a 5v5. We never want to take a 5v5. Yeah, we're never actually there.
Yeah.
Right. So it does make sense in that aspect because the reason Brightwing is not that good is her healing is not great during the poke phase. It's like okay, but it's not amazing, and she's not great in team fights and full team fights. She really excels in skirmishes, like 2v2s, 3v3s. Well, at this point, with the double global and the very mobile non-global heroes, like Fnatic is really committed. We're never going to 5v5.
Right.
So in that specific situation, Brightwing is actually excellent because you're completely trying to dodge her bad matchup in the sense of like what she does poorly in game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the only person that a hook on this team can really, really damage or is Brightwing, you know? Like if a hook lands on any of these other 4 heroes, they're unless there's a huge follow-up, which you don't quite have anymore, they're going to be okay, you know? Maybe Falstad. But I remember, dude, I remember the first time they added the tooltip to Brightwing that shows her healing range, the little ring, and I was like, oh, I thought it was way bigger. Like, I was like, oh, this hero is terrible. Like yeah. So the Brightwing pick, I was kind of like, I get it too. Like, they just want to be all over the map and just out macro. But it scared me a little bit for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously, it worked out. But Team Dignitas then does the thing. They pick the Illidan as their last pick, which I don't think is like abysmal. But I'm kind of like, you know, thinking face like, like, is this the thing? Like, you know, do you agree with the Illidan final pick here? Into a Brightwing, mind you.
I don't really like it. I feel like at this point, Dig is kind of scrambling like we need a global,
Yeah.
probably is what they're thinking. Like we have to have some form of global.
Right.
Uh, and at this point, this might be the point in the draft where like it has reached like unsalvageable
Right.
tier
It's
in
can't.
terms of like you have lost the draft. Now you have to try to do whatever you can to not have an unwinnable game in the sense. And I feel like I don't think Illidan was the pick. I
Do
don't know
you?
what other global works there, but it's a tough spot.
I was kind of leaning towards Zeratul in this spot, just
Hmm.
for maybe that pseudo global and like maybe picking off the right wing or finding the Genji's going to be okay or the Falstad. But the problem I run into with that is it's like, well, they're clearly not going to 5v5 us. How much value is Void
Yeah.
Prison going to get?
Hmm.
What would you put in that slot? I was thinking Zeratul. What would you think?
I'm looking at this draft from digging
It's
it. I'm
hard
trying
to
to figure out.
salvage. Yeah.
I feel like the Medivh also makes it really tough to actually think of like, okay, what works in this fifth slot? Because Medivh just makes comps function so differently. It's hard to say, oh, this hero would have been really great here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Illidan is one of the heroes who gets enabled by Medivh even,
Yeah, totally.
and they just don't plan on ever 5v5ing you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's any hero that could have helped,
Yeah.
especially given the way the game went, where there just weren't any 5v5s.
Yeah, and I think.
I,
Oh, go ahead.
it might have been. I mean, yeah, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even looking at the whole roster of heroes, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look great here. That doesn't
Yeah.
look great here. Like, at some point, maybe you just needed to pick, like almost a Sergeant Hammer-esque hero where you just, okay, we are three-man walking down your lane.
You
Come
have to
deal with
come.
it.
You
Like
have to
you
come.
have
Yeah.
to deal with it. Like a Sergeant Hammer or a Sylvanas, just something where you absolutely force the issue. You guys have to come 5v5 us, or we are taking a keep at 6 minutes. Like that's the kind of thing I think you need here for Dig to actually have a shot against his Fnatic lineup with how well they play Gobles. You just
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to say, "Come at me, bro!" Like you have to come to this fight now.
Yeah, and that's not a bad idea at all. And I was actually thinking what someone in chat said too. Is like maybe you just kind of Diablo, and you're just like come through the portal, kill a guy, try that. But
Hmm.
but like trying things in Game 7 of the biggest tournament so far, it's like you can't just try things. Like
Yeah,
it's really hard. So I think the reason I picked this draft was not because of what was on the line, but because I think it's a really good example of what in the current meta an Uther ban
yeah,
does for your draft. It
yeah.
all started with Uther, and Dignitas had a hard time drafting from that point on. And then the Tychus ban, the Medivh, they left the Falstad on the table. Like it kind of really fell apart for them, and they definitely lost this game pretty handily. I think because of the draft. So that's definitely why I picked it.
Yeah, it's a tough spot, I think, for Dignitas here. They both kind of had a game plan in mind and just all in on the game plan. Like, okay, we're playing Stitches this game, we're playing Globals this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Fnatic just had like the slight tweaks that allowed their comp to, have the way better matchup here.
Yeah.
And even then, like, this is one of those drafts where I think this is like a pretty Fnatic favorite draft,
Yeah.
but this game is not unwinnable because of the Stitches KT factor.
Right.
I mean, there could have been hooks that just won the game. It was the fact that not only did they lose the draft, so they're in kind of like a tough position. Like Fnatic's not really 5v5 lining up for them because of the way the comps work. They're not playing the game into Stitches the way Dignitas is used to. It was the combination of that plus the hooks not quite landing this game, plus like the globals getting pickoffs. It took all of these factors together for Fnatic to win.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the draft kind of put Dignitas on the back foot.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw. I mean, Fnatic in the game they played their globals like as well as you possibly
Yeah.
could. I think like it was like every time there was a soft spot on the map, there he was. There's Dahaka. There's Falstad.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was crazy. It was so good.
Yeah, this was a textbook, like this was a clinic on how to play globals
Yeah.
put on by Fnatic. It was really well done.
Absolutely, they deserved it for sure. Okay, so that was good. Got a little time if you want. I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about Hero League drafting, and maybe do like a draft with Dunk. Kind of, I'll put you on a map and give you a draft slot, and you do this obviously like 50 times a day on your stream, but it'd be nice to maybe take a little time and talk about your choices. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure, sounds fun.
All right. What's your favorite map right now?
Hmm. My favorite map right now, probably Cursed Hollow on this rotation. I feel like Cursed Hollow has the most standard drafts. Everywhere else, things start to get weird. You have like the niche picks that are only good on that map type stuff.
Sure. Okay, we'll do that. I was kind of leaning that way too. So your team has first pick. You are fourth pick. All right. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Cursed Hollow. Your team. You say please ban in chat. Maybe Genji or Uther or Nubarak.
If your team has first pick, I think you need to kind of ask like what your first pick wants to play. Even say like you have the hat, right? You have the hat, but you're in fourth slot, so you
Sure.
can ban. You really need to identify what role is your first pick's best role, hopefully, or like which of the OP heroes
Mm-hmm.
they're best on. Like my preference would be my first pick takes a Nubrak and Uther is banned. Like that's my preference for this is the most likely way we win the game, I think.
Okay. Your first pick is dead silent.
Yeah, my first pick says nothing.
Says
I
nothing.
have the hat. I probably ban Uther
Okay.
because I suspect that of the players in the game, the least number would pick Uther if he's up
Mm-hmm.
out of the OPs currently. Like if I consider the other OPs from Uther to be like a Nubrak, Malthael, Genji, I think I'm going to get one of those three generally in my first pick.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I don't think I'm likely to get Uther, even if he makes it past the ban phase from my first pick, if he's not already like hovering Uther, you know?
Yeah, I think that's very very logical. So it goes over to the other team's ban. They do ban out Dahaka. You're like, okay, I can see that. Cursed Hollow, Global, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then your first pick, you're gonna tell as this goes on that this may be inspired by real life. The first pick, the countdown goes down to about 3 seconds, and he picks Nazebo. So there's your Nazebo first pick on Cursed Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. Now
Yeah.
you're kind of like you're talking to your stream. You're like, oh no, but maybe it's okay. Tell now. This is where I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Nazebo. A
Yeah.
lot of people like playing him, and he's not a bad hero. But talk to us about when it's appropriate to play Nazebo.
This this is actually kind of funny that you chose Nazebo because I think Nazebo is actually really well positioned in the metagame
Okay,
here
sure.
with the heroes that are actually up right now. If you kind of think about like what heroes I consider to be the most powerful for Hero League right now,
Mm-hmm.
Genji, Malthael are the two I'm really worried about looking at this draft, but Nazebo kind of has like a sneaky good matchup against both, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Malthael kind of comes online in the late game, so like Nazebo also power spikes in the late game, but he's much better earlier than Malthael, I think. So you have a high likelihood of getting ahead because of map pressure of Nazebo, and Genji can't really assassinate Nazebo nearly as well as say a Vala or something. So I'm not actually upset at seeing like a
Yeah.
Nazebo first pick. I think he happens to slot in well here, even if he's not one of the like traditional OPs.
Right.
He just happens to have good matchups against what's banned.
See, now I do. Yeah, I do want to emphasize. I don't hate it, but it happens a lot. I don't think
Yeah.
it's optimal, but I don't hate
Yeah.
it either. So that's why I kind of want to maybe talk about when it's decent. So you think it's decent
Uh-huh.
here,
Yeah.
which I see why. The problem I think in Hero League with Nazebo is Nazebo kind of like, let's say there's 5 people on a team, each person's responsible for 20% of the win, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Nazebo like gives his team 5 of his percent. Like he's like, you take care of this, like I'm over here. When I get 20, I'll win you the game. But if you don't, it's your fault. Like so that's a good Nazebo. Obviously, it's different now, but I'm talking about just an average Nazebo.
Yeah.
That's what kind of heroes do you want to help a Nazebo? You get a Nazebo on your team. What sort of things do you want to do to maybe empower that Nazebo and help your team win?
I want heroes that lose the game slowly.
Right.
Is what I want. Like I want heroes with wave clear. I want heroes who are like innately more defensive. I want heroes who you play this hero and you don't have like a huge incentive to dive like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think about having like a Diablo on the same team as a Nazebo. Both those heroes are excellent, but I feel like they kind of go against what you want. Like Nazebo wants slow fights. He wants the enemy team walking into him,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants you to give ground grudgingly until you've won the team fight and then you turn.
Right.
Diablo wants to go ham and kill someone at the start of the fight. He wants a fast fight. And it's really easy as a Diablo to bait your squishy backliners into going too far forward out of position. And I feel like that's kind of like the, you know, opposite game plan. So I
Right.
don't want to see something like a Diablo here on my
Right.
Nazebo team.
On your team. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You aren't looking to brawl, you aren't looking to like charge in. Yeah, okay. So now Ragnaros was a traditional pick for Nazebo just because he could take over a fort and delay the game. Do you think that's still
Mhm.
pretty solid?
Um, Not early. I don't think Ragnaros is well
Mhm.
positioned in the metagame. I think he's actually
He's pretty weak.
really weak. He's really weak right now. Like a lot of the frontliners crush Ragnaros in their matchups. A lot of the other melee assassins I feel like bring more to the table or dive past him and he can't really have influence. So I'm not a big fan of early Ragnaros picks right now.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with you. But it's there if you kind of later in the draft,
Uh-huh.
So the enemy team does pick up the Falstad. They've heard that globals are good here,
Yeah.
and with their second pick, they get the Diablo. That's their tank player in the second slot, so
Uh-huh.
that's what's going on there. Okay, so we're going over to the second and third pick. You have no power over what's happening here. So what do they pick? I don't know. Let me think. They want a cool mage because they like to carry. So there's a Li Ming, which is not. This is again not a terrible choice on this map. It's okay. And then they want to get a healer of their own, so they pick up the. Let's say they get a Malfurion, and we can say this is new Malfurion or not. It's kind of irrelevant, but so now this is what you're looking at. We're going in the second ban phase. The enemy team sees that you don't have a tank, and they ban out. Who's a good tank right now?
They have to ban Anubarak here.
Yeah,
100%. If Anubarak is not gone at this point in the draft, it has to be banned.
Yeah, they will ban the Anubarak because that's
Yeah.
kind of everybody knows he's really good right now.
Yeah.
So there's that. Okay, you're back with the hat. You're looking at your ban.
Looking at this ban phase, they already have a global. I have backline that I'm nervous about. Like I don't like Li Ming and Malfurion
Mm-hmm.
together on a team with Nazebo. I feel like I'm really nervous for my backline.
Yeah.
What do I ban here? I think there's an option to ban Tassadar
Mm-hmm.
to weaken the potential Illidan dive strategy.
Okay.
I think there's also a potential to ban, like, okay, let's be real. This is Hero League. The enemy team has shown us Falstad Tat, like Diablo. They're not going to pick Tass, Illidan, healer. Like, that's not an option for them.
Right.
So way more realistically, in terms of what they'd actually pick, I would ban Genji. Because even though I think, like, the Tass enables the strategies to be stronger than just a Genji pick is good for them, it's Hero League. Like, realistically, I don't think it's as likely.
Right. Yeah, I concur with that. Now they go over to the enemy team. They need a healer. They need a lot of things. They do go with a double, like a classic power play, and they pick up Ariel and Vala.
Yeah.
Because again, this is Hero League. It's not going to be perfect teams. So
Yeah.
you're looking at that, and now this is why I kind of picked this draft for you, because I want to hear kind of. Not necessarily salvage a draft, but how can you, in this spot with your fourth pick, contribute the most to your team's chances in this situation?
Stitches. The answer is just
The answer is Stitches.
always. I feel like the answer is Stitches. If you're late in the draft like this, like, Stitches salvages drafts if you're
Right.
late here. I feel like he, power level wise, is in the, like, OP tier. I feel like he can play defensively well. You have the mouth follow up on roots. Like, I think Stitches is by far the best pick here.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that makes me a little nervous about the draft is, like, this allows them to last pick Tassadar if they want.
Right.
And that kind of scares me. You always have, like, this weird, is the Vala going to be good style of situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're playing against the Ariel Vala, and I feel like Tassadar makes up for so much. Like, no matter how much skill Vala lacks, I feel like Tassadar almost makes up for all of it when you're running the Tass Vala Ariel composition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's probably my biggest nervous thing. But you have the upside of potentially just hooking and insta-giving Ariel, which I think is fantastic. So I'd probably pick Stitches here, and then my last pick, I'm hoping he goes
Yeah. He
probably another front line. Like that would be ideal.
yeah, he recognizes your name and he's like, I'm gonna listen to this guy. So yeah.
um,
Leoric, or what are you thinking?
I actually don't hate Leoric. I think Leoric
Hmm.
loses slowly because he comes back from death's fast.
Right.
He's good against Diablo. He's a little weak into the double auto attacker, but like I'm not upset if he picks Leoric. I'm not upset really if he picks any kind of like bruisery tanky hero that doesn't have to dive. Like
Right.
anything from a Sonya to like Leoric.
Hmm.
I mean, the things I would be nervous about would be like a Chen would kind of bother me because
Right.
his game plan then is to like hard engage onto this team
Dive.
that's got hard engage. Like it's kind of weird. I wouldn't hate a Ragnaros, even though I think he's vulnerable to Diablo, or even just another like range hero if they have reasonable disengage. But I think probably my like number one here, I would be happiest to see would
Hmm.
probably be a Tyrael.
Tyrael. Okay.
Because I think that's the dream. Like they try to fight into us, and then we just Tyrael sink. But Tyrael makes me nervous in Hero League, so maybe Leoric's better.
Okay. Yeah.
Arthas, someone mentioned in chat Arthas. I think Arthas would be excellent. He's a little weak to Diablo, I think, on this patch, but overall very strong, especially against the double auto attackers, and follows up on hooks really well. So that's an option too.
Okay. Well, we'll say he doesn't own Tyrael and he picked Arthas. That's fine.
Uh
Okay. So obviously this is a little unrealistic because in Hero League that would be a Kerrigan, but going
huh.
because I was.
Yeah.
She's tanky.
Yeah.
She gets the shields. Uh, so going over to the other side though, because I feel like, at least in my Hero League, which obviously is not GM, but it's I think I know a thing or two about the game. But from my
Uh-huh.
experience, this last slot on the Reds team would be something bizarre like a Sylvanas. So there's your team. We
Yeah.
got the 4 ranged with the single Diablo. That happens a lot, and the Sylvanas applying pressure. Now, gameplay aside, obviously a lot of things can go wrong. But do you think you have a solid chance in this draft?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have two really good solo laners in Arthas and Azebo. I have insane hook follow up for like a Hero League game. Just having roots alone is like already good hook follow up.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we come together as a team, I have Arthas as well. I don't have any of the heroes who tend to be like the Rambo suicide heroes
Mm-hmm.
that really make me nervous. Like I don't have a Butcher. I don't have an Anubrak. I don't have any of the heroes that are going to be like, I'm going to dive on the Diablo team.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
1v5. Like, so to me, I feel like maybe this is my perspective, but the defensive team is at like a huge advantage, I feel like, in Hero League.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's hard to walk into your team, you almost always will find an opportunity for the enemy to get baited and like
Yeah.
overextend. It just happens all the time.
A defensive team puts the burden of execution on the enemy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hate to break it to you, but they have Gust, and you made they started hitting the boss a little early, and the Gust they stole the boss. It was 4 of you died, and yeah. So that's what happened. But I think you drafted well there. Nice stick with the Stitches pick. But yeah. So okay. So that was Hero League, a little Hero League experiment there. That was good. And yeah, I think that's some good draft talk tonight. Is there anything else you want to tell people about, maybe in their own drafts before we go? Maybe just some just basic, rules of thumb for drafting in Hero League or anything like that.
Rule of thumb. Rule of thumb number one, have enough wave clear. It depends what map you're on, how much wave clear is enough, but you need wave clear. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so difficult to get across to people how you can just lose the game not having wave clear. You're behind on every rotation. The enemy mercenaries get way too much value. Like it's so tough to play from the back foot, and you are on the back foot the whole time if you don't have enough wave clear. So that's like number one thing. Even if you don't want to play wave clear hero, like you want to be the guy who's playing Genji, right? I want to be the Genji guy, but
Yeah.
your last pick, Genji's still up. You're like, oh my god, I've never gotten Genji in last pick before. But your team has 0 wave clear. You pick a wave clear hero,
Yeah.
okay? And carry your team by soaking experience.
Right. Okay. So that's good advice. As far as the wave clear goes, so someone in chat he's kind of joking, but wave clear's
Yeah.
OP. You say Zul it is. Now, what kind of wave clear heroes can people maybe practice that you think are good right now?
So I'm gonna assume like the obvious wave clear heroes that are good are like the high tier ones. Like Dahaka is obviously good. He's got a global. He's really strong right now. He has wave clear. Um, like Vala is not bad wave clear. So she's really common, but she's also high priority, right? Like if you're in the later picks and you end up like, oh God, I need wave clear on my team, right? You probably aren't even getting the role you want. Maybe you're having to play support and you're like, well, who do I wave clear with as support? You pick Malfurion and take Moonburn at level 1 so you can actually wave clear, right? Maybe you have to play like the secondary frontline role and you need wave clear. Well, you better pick Sonya Leoric and hope the enemy team doesn't harass you out of lane every time. If you're main tank, I know a lot of people don't play Johanna, but if you need wave clear, Johanna is absolutely a viable pick, and I don't think she's even bad right now. Slam Build Stitches is okay, someone mentioned in chat, but the thing is your wave clear doesn't really turn on until later.
16, 13.
Yeah, like I feel like it's 7. Once you get the gas upgrade, then your wave clear is like not bad. And it's probably one of the better picks you can make, especially since Stitches can just win a game on your own. But that's the kind of thing where like it's varying degrees, right? If your team has 0 wave clear, they're all single target assault. You have Nova, Genji on your team, like no wave clear. Maybe you need the Johanna instead of the Stitches. Like you just need that much wave clear.
For sure.
It's all depending, but yeah, wave clear for sure.
So that's what I try to do on my stream, and what I tell people who are watching is play the hero in the role that you need to fill with the most wave clear. Like yeah, I think that's a really good rule of thumb. So anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
cool. I think we got a lot done there.
Yeah, we did. That was fun. So things we have coming in the near future. If you missed any part of the show, we have the VODs up within 24 hours on our YouTube channel. It's just Storm Legacy on the YouTube, and we'll be moving all these episodes to audio format and having them up as a podcast, an audio only podcast within the week. So there's that. Additionally, we're on our 4th episode of Nexus by the Numbers, which is from our friend Skizzers, who does super in-depth build videos with all the math broken down and some sleeper talents. It's very interesting stuff. The Malthael one we just released, so make sure to check that out. And got a ton of follows tonight, so we really appreciate that. And Dunk, we knew you'd be awesome. We've seen your draft analysis on your own stream. And thank you so much for coming on and taking time out of your own stream to come do this with us.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And do you have anything going on in the near future you want people to maybe know about, or is just doing your stream thing?
No, man, nothing coming up too soon. There's Bloodlust in a little over a month now, I think. So if you're interested in the NA Heroes scene, keep it alive, support Bloodlust. That's a great thing to do. Jake would really appreciate that. I will as well, since I'll be casting that. And other than that, just the stream for me, man.
Okay, cool. I will link that YouTube channel for you guys in the chat, and I think that'll do it for us then. Are you going back to streaming tonight, or are you done for today?
No, I'm done for today. Early stream end today, not going all the way till midnight. Shadow Realm was too much for me today, guys.
It hurts. It really does.
It does.
Okay, cool. Well, I stream during the day mostly. You can come live vicariously through my pain. You can Schadenfreude at me while I lose in Plat and Diamond. It'll be great, but I'm here every day doing Hero League. So thanks again for all the follows, and thanks for checking out Nexus Drafthouse. Talk to you guys later.